Let me start with one word because that one word is the entire story. Never. That's what Mark Carney said out loud, sitting just a few feet from Donald Trump inside the most photographed office on the planet. Not a hedge, not a diplomat's careful. Maybe not the kind of soft non-answer you'd expect a foreign leader to give while a sitting U.S. president stares him down in front of the whole world's cameras. Just one flat, final, unmistakable word. Never. And the reason that word mattered so much isn't because it was loud. It's because of what happened in the half second after he said it. Because for just a moment, the room that Donald Trump has spent his entire life trying to control didn't belong to him anymore. If you've ever watched two people who are supposed to be on the same side suddenly realize they are not, you know the feeling I'm describing. It's the air going still. It's everyone in the room deciding very quickly to look at their notes. And in that Oval Office, with the gold curtains and the resolute desk and the cameras clicking like machine guns, a Canadian Prime Minister and an American President had that exact moment over a single question, the question of whether Canada is for sale. By the end of this video, I'm going to walk you through exactly what was said, why Carney chose that one word on purpose, what Trump's never say never comeback was really trying to do, and why the trade numbers underneath this entire showdown tell a story that almost nobody is putting on the front page. So, stick with me because the words are dramatic, but the math behind them is the part that actually changes everything. Let me set the scene properly, because if you only saw the headline, you'd miss what made this so tense. This wasn't a press release. This wasn't a phone call read out by aides afterward. This was a face-to-face meeting in the Oval Office, the first real sit-down between these two men since Carney took over, and the entire framing going in was supposed to be about resetting a relationship that had gone cold. Trade was on the table. Tariffs were on the table. The future of the most valuable trading partnership on Earth was on the table. And in front of all of that, with the press pool still in the room, Trump did the thing he's done over and over again this year. He brought up the 51st state. He floated the way he always floats it, with that half smile. The idea of Canada simply becoming part of the United States. And this is where most leaders would have laughed nervously, changed the subject, or tried to glide past it with a joke. Carney didn't do any of that. He looked at the president and he told him, Canada is not for sale, and it never will be. Never. And here's the detail I want you to hold on to, because it's the thing the clips don't fully capture. He didn't say it like a man who was nervous. He didn't say it like a man who'd rehearsed a zinger and was hoping it landed. He said it the way a central banker reads out an interest rate decision. Calm, measured, like a fact that was already true before anyone walked into the room. And that calm is exactly what made it sting, because you can't bully a number. You can't outshout an inevitability. And Carney delivered it like an inevitability. Now, Trump, to his credit, is the most experienced television performer to ever hold that office. And he didn't miss a beat. He fired back with never say never. 3 words delivered with that grin, leaning back, playing to the cameras the way he always does. And on the surface, in the moment, it sounds like he won the exchange. It sounds like he had the last word. But I want you to slow down and actually think about what never say never is. Because it's not a counter-argument, it's not a fact, it's not a position, it's a refusal to accept the answer he was just given. And that's a very different thing. When someone tells you no, and your response is essentially, we'll see. You haven't reversed their no, you've just announced that you're not going to respect it. And everyone watching understood that distinction in real time, including, I'd argue, Trump himself. Here's why this lands on your kitchen table, and not just on some diplomat's desk in Ottawa or Washington. The 51st state talk sounds like theater, and a lot of it is. But underneath the theater is a very real question about leverage. Because the only reason a president of the United States feels comfortable joking about absorbing an entire G7 nation is if he believes that nation has nowhere else to go. The annexation talk and the tariff threats come from the exact same place. They both assume that Canada is so dependent, so locked in, so structurally trapped that it has no choice but to take whatever Washington decides to hand it. And that assumption, that single assumption, is the thing this entire showdown was really about. Carney's never wasn't just about sovereignty as a principle. It was about refusing the premise. It was about looking across that desk and saying, you think you hold all the cards and you're wrong. So let's actually look at the cards, because this is where it gets interesting. And this is the part the cameras never linger on. For decades, the story of Canada's economy has been told one way, and it's a story that makes Canada sound permanently cornered. Roughly 3/4 of everything Canada sells to the world goes to one customer, the United States. Around 75 cents of every export dollar. And when you hear that number, the natural instinct is to assume Canada is the one who should be sweating. One country buys 3 out of every $4 you make abroad, and that country's president starts talking about tariffs and annexation. You'd think Canada would fold like a cheap tent. But here's what that number hides, and it's the thing that makes Carney's calm make sense. Dependence that deep doesn't politely stay on one side of the border. It runs both ways. Those Canadian exports aren't luxuries the United States can shrug off. They're the inputs American factories run on. They're the energy that heats American homes and fuels American refineries. They're the aluminum in American cars, the lumber in American houses, the potash in American farmland, the electricity flowing into American cities. When you wire two economies together that tightly over 40 years, you don't create one master and one servant. You create two patients hooked up to the same machine. And anyone who's actually run a central bank, anyone who spent their career staring at the plumbing underneath an economy instead of the headlines on top of it knows that. Carney knows that. That's the whole reason he could say never without his voice shaking. And I want to be fair here because pretending there's no American argument at all would be lazy and you'd see right through it. There is a real case on the U.S. side that the trade relationship has imbalances, that certain Canadian protections in dairy and other sectors frustrate American producers, and that Washington has legitimate grievances it's entitled to push on. That part isn't fake. A negotiation is a negotiation, and both sides come in with complaints. But there's an enormous difference between negotiating hard over dairy quotas and standing in the Oval Office floating the dissolution of a sovereign country. One is trade. The other is a power play designed to make the other side feel small before the real talking even starts. And Carney clearly walked in having decided he was not going to be made to feel small. This is the part where the psychology and the strategy start blending together, and it's genuinely fascinating to watch. Think about what Trump's entire approach depends on. It depends on the other person reacting. It depends on emotion, on flinching, on the other leader either getting angry, which lets Trump look like the calm one, or getting flustered, which lets Trump look like the strong one. The whole machine runs on the other person losing their composure. So what do you do if you understand that? You deny it fuel. You stay flat. You answer the outrageous thing as if it were the most ordinary thing in the world, and you move on. And that's exactly what Carney did. Canada's not for sale, never will be. Next topic. No raised voice, no theatrical offense, just a closed door locked and the key already in his pocket. And that's why never say never was actually a tell. Because if Carney's answer had genuinely rolled off him, Trump wouldn't have needed to respond to it at all. You don't bother swatting at something that didn't touch you. The fact that he reached for a comeback, the fact that he couldn't just let the no sit there tells you the no landed. It tells you that in that exchange, for once, Trump was the one reacting. And in a room built entirely around the idea that Donald Trump never reacts, he only acts. That's not nothing. That's the whole game flipping for a few seconds. Now, let me pull you back to the bigger picture, because one tense Oval Office moment is only interesting if it signals something larger. And this one does. After the meeting, both sides put out the kind of language you'd expect when nobody wants to admit how rocky it actually was. The relationship was on a better trajectory. They said things were more constructive, and maybe at the surface level that's even true. But notice what did not come out of that meeting. There was no tariff relief announced, no breakthrough on the trade file, no grand deal. Two leaders sat in the most powerful office in the world, talked about resetting the most important economic relationship either country has, and walked out with warm adjectives and zero concrete movement on the thing that actually matters to workers and businesses on both sides of the border. And that gap, the gap between the friendly words and the empty results, is the real headline because it tells you that underneath the photo op, the fundamental standoff hasn't moved an inch. Trump still wants Canada to bend on Washington's terms, on Washington's timeline measured by Washington's yardstick. And Carney still isn't bending. The never wasn't just about the 51st state fantasy. It was a preview of how this man intends to negotiate everything calmly, factually, and without ever once accepting that Canada is the weaker party in the room. Here's where it gets even more important for anyone watching this from Canada. Because this is the part that touches your life directly. When the rules of cross-border trade sit in limbo, when nobody knows what the tariffs will be next quarter or whether the broader agreement governing North American trade survives its next review, businesses freeze. They stop investing. They delay the new plant. They put off the new hire. They pad their prices to protect against uncertainty they can't predict. And eventually that uncertainty shows up exactly where you live in the price of a new vehicle, in what a contractor quotes you, in whether the factory in your town gets the green light this year or watches the project slide to next year or to never. A leader who walks into that Oval Office and gets steamrolled would have made all of that worse. A leader who holds the line, who refuses to let the other side dictate the entire frame, at least keeps Canada's hand in the game. And this is where Carney's background stops being a biographical footnote and becomes the actual point. This is a man who ran the Bank of Canada through a financial crisis, then got recruited to run the Bank of England, the first non-Brit ever handed that job, through Brexit, which was its own slow-motion negotiation between economies trying to untangle themselves. He has spent his entire professional life in rooms where the loudest voice is almost never the one with the real power, where the person who stays calm while everyone else panics is the one who walks out with what they wanted. So when he sat across from a president whose entire method is to dominate the room through sheer force of presence, Carney wasn't intimidated by it. He'd seen that movie. He knew that the performance and the leverage are two completely different things, and that confusing them is how you lose. Let me come back to that one word never, because I want you to understand why the choice of word itself was so deliberate. Trump's whole framing of the 51st state idea is designed to keep a door open. It's always a wink, always a maybe, always you never know what could happen. It's an invitation to treat Canadian sovereignty as a thing that's up for discussion, a thing that could theoretically be on the table someday under the right pressure. And the single most powerful way to kill that framing isn't to argue with it. It's to slam the door so hard it can't be reopened. Never. Not a maybe. Not a we'll see. Not a let's not get into hypotheticals. Never. By choosing the most absolute word in the language, Carney took the entire fantasy and threw it out of the room. And Trump's never say never was the sound of a man trying to wedge his foot back in a door that had just been bolted shut. Now, I want to talk about what this means going forward, because this is the question I keep coming back to. Where does this actually lead? And here's my honest read. The friendly language coming out of that meeting is going to keep getting tested because the underlying pressure isn't going anywhere. Trump's strategy with Canada has always been to keep the threats vague and constant. The tariffs hanging overhead, the annexation talks simmering, the trade agreement's future left deliberately uncertain, all of it designed to keep Canada off balance and eager to make concessions just to get a moment of stability. And what Carney signaled in that Oval Office is that he's not going to play that game on Trump's terms. He's going to stay calm. He's going to keep pointing at the data, and he's going to keep reminding everyone quietly but firmly that the dependence in this relationship runs in both directions. And there's a bigger move underneath all of it that the never moment hints at, because the only real long-term answer to a partner who keeps threatening you is to need that partner a little less. Every step Canada takes to diversify, to sell more to Europe, to Asia, to anyone who isn't waving tariffs and annexation jokes around, every one of those steps takes a little air out of Washington's leverage. It's slow. It doesn't happen in one meeting. But the man who said never in that office is the same man who understands better than almost anyone that the way you make a never stick over the long run isn't with a louder voice. It's by methodically making sure the other side has less and less ability to make you say yes. So let's bring it all the way back to that room, to those few seconds that everyone's talking about. A U.S. president floated the idea, however jokingly, of swallowing an entire country. A Canadian prime minister answered with one word: calm and absolute. Never. And the president, the man who was never supposed to be the one reacting, reached for a comeback. Never say never. On the surface, it looks like a draw. 2 leaders, 2 lines, cameras clicking. But underneath the surface, something shifted. For once, the pressure wasn't all flowing one direction. For once, the Canadian in the room wasn't the one being managed. He was the one setting the terms of what was and wasn't up for discussion. And he did it without raising his voice, without losing his composure, without giving the other man a single inch of the emotional reaction his entire strategy depends on. That's the thing I want you to take away from all of this. The loudest person in the room is almost never the most powerful one. The person with the real leverage is the one who can stay calm while everyone else performs. The one who knows the numbers cold. The one who can say a single hard word and mean it completely. In that Oval Office, that person wasn't sitting behind the resolute desk. And I think deep down both men knew it. Here's the question I'll leave you with, because I genuinely want to know what you think. Was Carney's flat never the smartest possible move? Refusing to give Trump the reaction he wanted and quietly winning the exchange on points? Or do you think standing that firm that early with so much trade still unresolved risks turning a negotiation into a grudge match Canada can't afford? Drop your take in the comments, because this is exactly the kind of moment where reasonable people land in completely different places, and I read every one of them. If you want clear, calm breakdowns of these Canada-US showdowns, the words, the strategy, and the real numbers underneath the headlines, this is what we do here at Laura Hayes Point. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because this story is far from over, and the next round between these two is already taking shape. I'll see you in the next one.